Monica Hale stepped into Riverton Galleria Mall for a quiet day of shopping. To the staff, she was just another black woman with a heavy purse, an easy target. Security guards Baker and Torres moved in, their footsteps heavy, eager to corner her. Then appeared Officer Wade Kincaid, loud, smug, the law twisted into fear. What none of them realized was the fire behind Hale's steady gaze. 2 decades on the force, a captain's badge earned through grit and sacrifice. They expected her silence. They expected her obedience. But they were wrong. In the next moment, arrogance would meet its reckoning. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from and make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. Captain Monica Hale had 2 decades of nights and weekends behind her badge and the quiet posture of someone who'd learned how to be both present and unremarkable. She'd promised herself this afternoon was a hard boundary. No work, no calls, no reports. Just a quick stop at Riverton Galleria to pick up the sketchbook her goddaughter had been hinting about for months. The mall was a Saturday's soundtrack. Stroller wheels clicking, cinnamon sugar warming the air, a busker bending notes into blue above the escalators. She turned her face into the light cut by skylights and thought about how a good gift could light up a whole small world. That's when she caught them the chrome reflection of a sunglass kiosk. 2 security guards trying to look like tourists. The tall one, Baker, with knuckles like old stone, and the younger one, Torres, chewing the inside of his cheek like it was a secret. Their pretend looked back at her from mirrored lenses, and Monica, who could read a city from the arch of his shoulder, felt the old tightness knot between her ribs. She shifted the bag higher, not to hide anything. There was nothing to hide, but to anchor herself. Inside Bell and Company, all soft lighting and fragrant air, where displayed glass gleamed like held breath, Monica drifted to a case of silver charms. The quiet was syrup thick, until a woman at the counter, blazer arrow straight, cut into it with a practiced smile that never touched her eyes. "Can I help you find something?" Her name tag said Karen in tasteful serif, a coincidence that would later feel like a headline. "I'm looking for a sketchbook in the paper boutique, and maybe a bracelet for a birthday," Monica said. Calm, even, a life of practice. "Those cases don't open without a manager present," the woman said, though her keys were already on a ring in her hand. Her gaze didn't leave Monica's bag. "We monitor inventory closely." Monica nodded, choosing the butterfly charm, tiny wings, etched with light. "Could I see that one?" The keys rattled. The case opened. The charm caught. Monica's mouth softened. She could see it on Selah's wrist, the way 10-year-olds held their hands out to make a new thing glimmer. She thought of Selah's pencil dragons and the way a line could turn to flight on the page. "I'll need to look in your bag," the clerk said, voice rising like a siren that wanted to be heard. Conversation stalled. The quiet left. Monica blinked. "I'm sorry. We're missing a piece from the display." The woman's hand, steady from years of forming accusations, pointed at the tote. "You were closest to the case." Torres appeared first, unsure enough to look at his shoes. Baker followed, confidence like a shield, one hand on a radio he didn't need. "Ma'am, if you'll cooperate," he said, "we can clear this up quickly." Monica could have answered with a dozen tools. Policy quotes, case law, a captain's voice honed in rooms where men with tempers were told to sit down. Instead, she breathed, "I haven't touched anything except the charm your manager showed me. I'd appreciate you checking your inventory logs and the camera above that door." Heads tilted, eyes flicked upward. No one stepped toward the monitor. "We can do that," Baker said, not moving. "Meanwhile, open the bag." "No." Monica folded her hands at the level of the glass case, where the butterfly still waited in a square of velvet. "You have no probable cause to search my personal property. I'm asking you to review your footage." The radio on Baker's shoulder cackled to life. "Unit 3, you need backup?" "No," Monica said before he could answer, but he had already keyed the mic. "Code check at Bell and Company." Subject refusing a voluntary bag search. Phones lifted like flowers turning to the sun. A girl with purple braids mouthed, "Oh my God," and started recording. Somewhere close, a stroller rolled to a stop. A man in a baseball hat said, "Here we go," in a tone that remembered other times. The first uniform into the doorway wore a certainty like cologne, heavy, layered, expensive with borrowed authority. Officer Wade Kincaid, mid-30s, hard-edged, a grin like a blade turned sideways. Monica knew the name, not from commendations. "What V we got?" he said, too loud for a store that preferred whispers. "Potential theft," Karen announced. "Apology already arranged for a press release later. She refuses a bag check." Kincaid didn't look at the cameras, didn't look at the case. He stepped to Monica like she was a length of rope he meant to tie off and leaned so close she could count the nicks on his chin. "Here's the easy way," he said, voice pitched for an audience. "Open the bag and walk out. Or I cuff you, charge you, and you can explain it to a judge." "The easy way," Monica said, "is for you to ask your manager to roll the footage back 60 seconds. He reached for her shoulder. "Don't," she said. Soft. Final. But he'd already put his hand on her, and then there were fingers biting into muscle and emotion she knew too well. The jerk, the twist, the push toward the glass. The charm rattled in its tray. The store gasped as a single sound. "Hands behind your back," Kincaid said. "Don't make it worse." "It gets worse when you ignore policy," Monica said, keeping her voice at a plain line. "You do not have grounds." The cuffs were tight enough to deny her wrists. She didn't fight. Fighting was what he wanted. Fighting was what he needed to point at later. She stood very still and looked at the camera over the door until she could feel the lens like a witness on her skin. The mall is a theater with 1,000 red exit signs. They walked her down its center aisle. Kincaid lifted his chin like a masthead. People parted, phones poised, a tide of eyes. When the sunlight hit, it felt sharp as glass. He opened the back door of his cruiser with a flourish he'd practiced and turned her toward the crowd like a prize. "Before you take another step," Monica said, clear so the boom of her voice could sit on recordings, "you need to check my front jacket pocket. Left side. There's a badge there." Kincaid barked a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, we got a comedian." "Check it." He did. His hand landed on the weight she'd carried since her 30th birthday, the one her mother had photographed on her palm like a coin of the realm. He pulled it out, and the gold caught the sun like a dare. "That's cute," he said. He tried to keep his mouth hard, but the color had left it. Impersonating an officer is a felony. A murmur became a wave. "She's a cop," someone said. "Wait, she's a real cop." A young man in a hoodie pushed forward, angling his screen for a better shot. "Zoom in on the name," someone else whispered. "Read it," Monica said. He did, because he had to. He read the rank in the name, Captain Monica Hale, and then looked at her as if the letters had turned into teeth. "You're under arrest," he said, weaker now. "For resisting an unlawful search," she answered. "And while we're reciting things, add excessive force to your report." Silence formed around the words. The air felt charged like before a summer storm. Somewhere behind Kincaid, a second cruiser rolled up, light spinning. A sergeant stepped out, graying hair, tired eyes that knew the difference between bluster and disaster. Sergeant Lena Whitaker. "Fair. Careful." She took it in. The cuffs, the crowd. The badge Kincaid still held like a hot coal. "Officer Kincaid," she said, one eyebrow in indictment. "Explain." She, shoplifting, refused a bag check. "She is Captain Hale," Whitaker said, as if he needed reminding how to read. "Remove the cuffs." Kincaid hesitated. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the camera lenses like an animal uncertain about glass. He looked back at Monica, at the set of her shoulders. Then he swallowed, fumbled the key, and metal clicked open in the kind of quiet that feels loud. Monica rubbed her wrists. The skin was rising where the metal had bitten. She didn't look at him. She lifted her chin toward Whitaker. "I'd like to request that Bell and Company preserve their security footage for the last 30 minutes, and that Riverton Galleria provide copies of all relevant camera angles. I'll be filing a formal complaint. And Sergeant," she let the word hold for a beat, "make sure the officers' body cams don't develop amnesia." A teenager near the fountain hooped. Someone else called, "Tell him, Captain." The crowd wasn't a crowd anymore. It was a memory being made. Whitaker's nod was a promise. We'll secure the footage. Kincaid's mouth worked like he wanted a different outcome to fall out of it. Ma'am, he said finally, somehow both mock respectful in a plea, if you just... But Monica was already turning away, heart thudding in her throat, where rage meets discipline. She had come for paper and a charm. She left with bruises blooming on her wrists and a day that would not belong to her anymore. In the parking lot heat, her phone vibrated and vibrated and vibrated. Texts from officers she trusted, from her goddaughter's mother, from an unknown number that said, "You don't know what you're doing." She unlocked the car with a thumb that shook and sat very still for 3 breaths. Then she opened her notes app and began to type. By sundown, the video had passed 1 million views. By midnight, it had a caption. They cuffed a woman for shoplifting. They didn't know she was a captain. The comments were a city of their own. She scrolled, not because she needed to be convinced of reality, but because she needed to take the measure of it. Under the noise, the pattern was already rising to the surface like a watermark on old paper. She had seen this before. She had written memos, held trainings, pushed for de-escalation, for bias checks, for the kind of boring policy that saves lives and reputations and budgets. And yet, her email pinged, a subject line like a fuse. Incident report, 6R 7742. She opened it and read a version of the day composed by someone else's pen. Her refusal inflated to aggression. Her request for cameras rewritten as interference. The cuff marks that would purple by morning described as incidental contact during a lawful detention. And at the bottom, CC to Internal Affairs and to the chief, because this kind of narrative always migrates up the chain first. Monica sat back, eyes burning. Outside, a siren unfolded 3 blocks away and then stitched itself closed. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she knew better than her own. "Taryn," she said when her friend answered. "I need you." "Already saw it," said Taryn Cole, defense attorney. "Equal parts fire and letter of the law. I'm pouring wine and printing statutes. Get here." Monica glanced at the time. 10 minutes. Good. Bring the bag you didn't open. "Always," Monica said, and hung up a humorless huff that was almost a laugh, almost a sigh. She looked at herself in the little rectangle of the rear-view mirror. Her eyes were steadier than she felt. She pulled sleeves down over wrists, a gesture as old as shame, as old as armor, and started the car. The dash clock ticked to 9:13 p.m. Riverton slept like a big cat, eyes open, waiting. She would not. Taryn's apartment smelled like basil and printer ink. Cooler air, glass of something dark already sweating on a coaster. There was a half-eaten bowl of pasta Monica wouldn't remember tasting, and a manila folder big enough to be a doorstop. Taryn had pull case law, incident stats, prosecutor commentary on mall-based arrests. She spoke in clean, clipped sentences, her brain an index. "They do this all the time," she said, sliding over a spreadsheet. "Retail calls are candy for a certain kind of cop. You refuse a bag check, which you have every right to do, and suddenly voluntary morphs into probable. Then they stack resisting on top when you ask for cameras." "How many?" Monica asked. "I can confirm 28 this year," Taryn said. "But these are just the ones who had a lawyer. For every person who calls me, 5 more take a plea because they can't miss work, or they're scared, or they don't trust the system to hear them." Monica traced her finger down the list. So many names she didn't know. So many lives she could picture anyway. Same officers? Some repeats. Kincaid's there. So's Officer Pratt. A few mall security names pop up like rotten apples. Baker shows 5 times. Different managers. But one constant. What? Probation. Taryn tapped the last column. Every plea funnels into Harbor Point Compliance, a private probation contractor. Monthly fees. Drug tests, even when the original charge was retail. Miss a payment? You're in violation. It's a legal treadmill. Monica leaned back, the shape of it clicking into place in her head, like a lock turning. Follow the money. My favorite mantra, Taryn said, smiling without warmth. And look at this. Harbor Point's parent company sits under Easton Ridge Holdings. Guess who sits on that board? I'm afraid to ask. The Galleria's ownership group, Taryn said. The people who rent the glad spaces and the bad faith. Any other night, Monica would have laughed at the poetry. Tonight, it just felt like a floor falling away. We need records, financials, emails. We need a journalist, Taryn said. Someone with a sharp shovel. As if on cue, Monica said. Because as if on cue, her phone buzzed with number tagged unknown and a voice introduced itself as Jade Rios, investigative reporter with the Riverton Register. I'm outside your building, Jade said. Before you say no, I have something you'll want to see. Come up, Taryn said, when Monica mouthed a question. But we start with ground rules. They did, off the record until they said otherwise. No blindsiding, no publishing photos of children or addresses. Jade agreed to all of it, which earned her a page in Monica's ledger-marked provisional trust. Jade wore boots and resolve. She set a laptop on the coffee table, like a gambler laying down a winning hand. I've been following Harbor Point for months, she said, pulling up a chart. Their revenues spike quarterly. At the same time, arrests near the mall tick up. Not seasonal, statistical aberrations, like someone's cooking numbers. Someone is, Taryn said. Easton Ridge owns both the mall and Harbor Point. That's the rumor, Jade said. It's hard to prove. They funnel through shell companies. But if we can connect officers to management, we can show intent. Monica pinched the bridge of her nose, and the day came back in a flood. The keys, the cuffs, the voice pitched for performance. Kincaid knew exactly what he was doing. Because he's done it before, Jade said, I have 4 videos of him escalating a bag check into an arrest. Same stores, same script. They sat there until the basil wilted, and the wine went stale, building a wall of notes, names, docket numbers, establishing what they could prove and what they could suggest. The plan wasn't a plan yet, but it had a spine. Crowdsource videos, request discovery from every case Taryn could touch. File preservation letters to the mall and the Bell and Company. Draft a complaint naming officers and managers and Harbor Point as co-conspirators. Prepare for blowback. Blowback will come fast, Jade said. They'll smear you, Captain. They already started, Monica said, sliding her phone across the table. The anonymous text glared back. You don't know what you're doing. Taryn frowned. That reads like someone who thinks you're protecting a system that feeds him. Or someone who thinks I should remember how quiet dark streets can be, Monica said. She tucked her phone away. Either way, they'll show their hand. They didn't have to wait long. By morning, an editorial appeared in the paper that enjoyed civic pageantry more than civic truth. It used words like unfortunate and misunderstanding and alleges. A TV panel invited a former mall manager who lamented the rise of antagonistic shoppers. A radio host with a name like a weather forecast called Monica emotional. Her email chimed with a notice from Internal Affairs. She was to report the next day for a preliminary interview. Suspended pending investigation. Badge relinquished. Service weapon surrendered. The words didn't read as words. They read as the walls of a narrow corridor you were forbidden to widen. Monica wore her plain clothes to the precinct like armor. The neat blazer that hid the marks on her wrists. The neutral flats of a woman who understands that loud shoes are sometimes charged as intent. She turned in the badge that had opened precinct doors and watched the metal pass across the desk with an unclassed finality that made her throat hurt. On the way out, a lieutenant she'd trained with 30 cadets ago, Randall Brewster, leaned in a doorway. You picking a fight with the world? He said, eyebrows tilted like he was teasing, voice pitched too low to be heard by anyone but her. I'm picking the right fight, she said. Careful. He smiled with only his teeth. Gravity favors the heavyweight. Not when the ring's on fire, she said, and kept moving. She didn't see the glossy truck until she reached her block that evening. It idled one house down from hers, windows tinted too dark, a bass line crawling just low enough to vibrate the air. When she parked, the truck rolled forward slow, made a left at the end of the street, and disappeared like a threat slipping behind a curtain. Inside, she locked the 3 locks and doubled the chain. The house answered with its usual night noises. The refrigerator's cough, the baseboard's tick. She moved room to room anyway, scanning corners, testing windows. In the office, she slid open the bottom drawer of her desk and pressed the invisible button that released a hidden panel. The space behind it held a new hard drive she purchased on her lunch break and a folder labeled Letters to Future Me, because sometimes naming a thing gave you air. She placed her notes inside and closed the panel. Then she sat on the floor and let herself feel the day hit her like a slow wave. Her phone buzzed against the wood beside her. New message, unknown. She tapped and read a single line. "Leave it alone, Captain. We are not who you think we are." She stared until the words blurred. Then she took a screenshot and labeled it with the date and time. Another piece of the files. By 10 o'clock, video submissions were pouring into the anonymous tip link Jade had spun up. People had been shoved in dressing rooms to have receipts demanded, those who had paid for ankle monitors with rent money, those who had learned to walk through the atria with their eyes down and their hands visible. The stories tumbled into Monica's inbox like whitewater. She read every one, breath hitching, fury steadying into something that felt like work. At midnight, a knock. She froze, gunless now in a house that had always felt like safe water. Another knock, then a voice she knew. "It's me, Maya." No, not Maya. She corrected herself. Different friend, different story. This was Annie Ray, a neighbor who cooked collard greens on Sundays, and had known Monica since she was a rookie. Monica opened the door to the sight of Ray holding a plate under foil and looking like she had something more than food. "You don't have to be brave by yourself," Ray said, walking past with the authority of somebody's favorite aunt. "I brought stew and a story." Ray's grandson, Jordan, had been grabbed outside the same mall last winter for looking at the wrong exit. The charges hadn't stuck, because Taryn had taken the case pro bono, but the probation fees had taken their rent budget to the bone. Ray talked with her hands like witnesses do. Her eyes were knives. "We pay them to say we did wrong that we didn't do," she said. "We're financing our own cages." Monica had no phrase to translate the ache. She had a notebook. She wrote. She asked questions she'd learned to ask. Who? When? How many? Where the paper trail turned. When Ray left, the kitchen smelled like onions and truth. Sometime before dawn, Monica finally slept. She dreamed of stairwells. At the bottom of each one, a door waited with a lock she did not have a key for. She woke with a certainty that keys existed. She just needed the right locksmith. By noon, Jade called from a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and television. "They jumped me," Jade said, voice thin around the edges. "Two guys. Knew how to hurt without leaving much." One flashed a badge when a nurse yelled. "Department issue." Monica's skin went cold. "You saw it." Chrome. Serial scratched. But the holster was standard. He knew how to carry like habit. Monica stared at the wall while silence shaped itself between them. "Which means they know we have something. They want to find it." "They already tried," Jade said. "Whoever hit me grabbed my phone. Joke's on them. I've got auto backup. But Captain?" "What?" "Protect your copies." Monica hung up, walked to the desk, opened the drawer, checked the hidden panel. The drive waited there like a promise. She moved it to a second hiding place, behind the vent in the hallway, then wrote herself a note about redundancy. She made 3 more copies and placed them in 3 more imperfectly safe places. She texted Taryn one word, contingency, and got a thumbs-up emoji back, and then, after breath, a text that said, "I hate that I understand you from the inside." That night, the front door lock looked fine from the outside. From the inside, the jamb had a new scratch near the latch, a tongue would lifted and freckled with fresh splinters. The desk drawer had a pry mark no one would see unless they knew where to look. The hidden panel was open. The vent was slightly askew. The drive was gone. Monica didn't scream. Screaming would have been an admission that the world had surprised her in exactly the way it wanted to. She called 911 and reported the break-in. The patrol car that arrived 20 minutes later was driven by eyebrows she didn't recognize and a young officer whose pen shook. She asked them for a case number. She asked them to dust the vent for prints. She watched their faces and saw what she expected. apology, impotence, a glaze that comes when a case is a file that grows cobwebs the moment it reaches a desk. When the door closed behind them, her phone buzzed again. "Next time we take more than toys, Captain." She typed back in a thread she would never send to a number she didn't have. "Next time, you meet daylight." And then she did what she would always do when the dark pressed its fingers against a window. She made a list. Rally witnesses. Secure duplicates out of the house. Go louder. Every line felt like pulling a thread that might unravel the suit they had sewn her into. Good. Let it unravel. Let it fall to the floor where everyone could see what it was. The term went out like a church bell heard in kitchen sinks and soccer fields. Rally at Riverton Galleria. Bring your signs, your stories, your phones. 3 p.m. Saturday. Wear comfortable shoes and a measure of your courage. By 2:30, the atrium plants were a jungle around 100 people. By 3, there were 500. Somebody brought a megaphone that didn't need itself, because voices carry in wide spaces. Monica arrived in sunglasses and a baseball cap, but anonymity is a thin scarf when your story is the right size. People recognize her by the line of her jaw, by the straight of her back. A teenager near the fountain whispered, "That's her," with a reverence people usually say for actors or athletes. Monica wanted to tell her she was neither. She was just a person whose day had been stolen. She was a person trying to get it back. Instead, she nodded, one human to another. A girl stepped out from the crowd with a phone clutched like a passport. "I'm Naya," she said, braided hair and eyes that had learned early to calculate. "I recorded that day, not just a takedown. Before." Monica's heart stuttered. "Before?" "5 minutes before you walked into Bell and Company," Naya said, thrusting the phone toward her. "Officer Kincaid is in the hallway. He's talking to the manager. They look at you in the camera feed. Then he steps back, and the guards surround you like they practice." The video was shaky because fear shakes hands. It was clear anyway. Kincaid leaned across the counter toward Karen. His mouth made a shape around words Monica couldn't hear. Karen nodded, eyes small. He pointed to the monitor, where the escalator delivered shoppers like an assembly line. Monica entered the frame 2 minutes later, just another woman with a purpose. She watched the geometry of the scene happen again, how people become triangles when they mean to trap you, she felt. With a fresh chill, the plan under the moment. How many times had they drawn this shape before? How many times had no one filmed the blueprint? "Why didn't you release this?" Monica asked, finally breathing again. Naya looked down. Nobody listens. But everyone is listening now. "Everyone is listening," came a voice to Monica's right. Reverend Cal from the community center, carrying a clipboard like an anchor, and we brought our affidavits. He hoisted a sheaf of statements in plastic sleeves. Each was a life. We got 42 and counting. The megaphone passed hand to hand. People stepped up and offered stories that cracked and cut. The rhythm was messy and holy. "I'm Angela," and they cuffed me in front of my son, while the ice in our grocery bags melted. "I'm Theo, and I paid $1,400 to be told I was untrustworthy." "I'm Marisol, and my probation officer texted me at 3 a.m. to remind me who owned my mornings." When Monica took the megaphone, the crowd quieted to a hum. She didn't want to make a speech that felt like a badge. She wanted to make a map and a promise. "I'm Monica," she said, because Captain wasn't the point. "I used to think the best way to fix a house was to sweep the floor every morning and patch holes as they appeared. Turns out there's mold in the walls. You can't sweep that. You rip it out or you breathe it." A cheer rose and broke. Security clustered at the doors, radios buzzing. Police formed a line, some familiar faces stony, some uneasy, some looking at her with something like waiting. Jade's text pinged at exactly the right wrong moment. "City Council meets Tuesday." We flood the room. Taryn added, "I'll prepare your remarks. You'll be limited to 3 minutes. We'll make them count." Reverend Cal, "We'll have bodies in seats and voices in hallways." Monica looked at Naya's phone again, the unedited before. "We can use this," she said. "Not just to show what happened to me, but to show how many times the same script plays." Naya nodded. "I run a channel. I can cut a compilation. With your voiceover, people will understand. They agreed on a plan. 1 hour before the council meeting, the before/after video would go live across every platform that would hold it. The affidavit sheet would be published with names redacted where requested. Monica's remarks would carry the braid. Personal story, pattern, paper trail. They would feed it to the machine and then jam the gears. Don't expect them to let you speak, Taryn texted. I don't need their permission to make air vibrate, Monica wrote back. Tuesday came with a thunderhead of anticipation. City Hall smelled like old wax and new scandal. The chamber filled with suits and T-shirts and cameras on tripods. The mayor dabbed at his forehead with a handkerchief and then smiled for a picture he would regret later. In the back, Kincaid sat with his jaw set tight, the tendons jumping like live wire. Next to him, Monsieur Lydia Brome scrolled her phone and did not look up. 2 council members stared at their laps as if guilt had a beeping light. Naya hit post from the hallway. Phones chimed in a domino wave. Heads bowed into screens. A murmur moved like weather. The mayor's gavel tapped anemically and bounced off the din. Public comment, he said, voice high. 3 minutes. First speaker. Monica Hale, the clerk read. The room recognized her before the name finished leaving the clerk's mouth. She stepped into a space that felt like electric potential. The lectern was scarred from years of civic hands. She placed her notes on it and did not look down. My name is Monica Hale, she said, and her voice climbed the column of the room and rang its bell. I've served this city 20 years. Last Saturday, I walked into the Riverton Galleria to buy a gift. I walked out in handcuffs for refusing an unlawful search. You've seen the video. Now I need you to see the rest. She held up a packet. Affidavits. 42 so far. Each one a person who was accused without cause, pressured to pleas, and placed under private probation administered by Harbor Point, owned by Easton Ridge Holdings, which also owns stakes in the Galleria. I have emails. She lifted a second packet. Between mall management and officers discussing loss events and target demographics. I have timestamps that match arrest spikes to quarterly reporting. You don't need a conspiracy theory when you've got a spreadsheet. You don't have proof those emails are real, a councilman interrupted, voice thin with panic. Monica smiled with no joy. We have headers. We have threads from private accounts obtained legally and backups from a journalist device after a department-issued badge was brandished in a hospital hallway. We have videos from before arrests show up on body cam. Videos of officers pre-staging detentions. We have Harbor Point invoices that line up with court dockets like barcodes. You can't, began the mayor. We can, said Taryn from the aisle, not through a mic, but her voice found a way. And we will file this with the Attorney General in the morning. Kincaid surged up, the kind of forward motion a body makes when it is used to being met with flinch. 2 officers stepped between him in the aisle. Chan and Ramirez, Patrol Division, eyes level, spines taller in this moment than in any award photo. Sit down, Wade. Chin said, You're not running this room. Traitor, he hissed. It sounded like paint on a car door. Ugly, fresh, misspelled by intent. Accountability. Ramirez said, voice low. Learn the difference. Monica didn't let the moment drift. We are asking for 3 things. 1, an independent investigation into officers' conduct at the Galleria and any relationships with Easton Ridge. 2, a moratorium on private probation contracts pending review. 3, preservation orders for all mall and body cam footage from the last 2 years. And if we decline, the mayor asked, a flicker of old power returning to his tone, then you'll have declined in front of these cameras and this city, Monica said, with the calm of a person who knows exactly where she stands. And the state will step in. Either way, the mold leaves the wall. The gavel tried again. The room answered with chant, soft at first, then swelling. Preserve the tapes. Clap. Preserve the tapes. Clap. Even some suits near the back joined in when they remembered they had children who might one day go to a mall. A woman in a navy skirt suit slid in from a side door like a piece clicked into a puzzle. I'm Deputy AG Callie Hart, she said, holding up a credential that made the room hush. Captain Hale, Ms. Cole, Ms. Rios, if you'll step this way, we'll take your statements. Kincaid's face went the color of paper left in the sun. Brome stood and tried to leave and found her path blocked by two investigators whose shoes were sensible in a way that says they expect to spend long days on their feet. The mayor dabbed his forehead again and looked down and saw that his handkerchief had left a damp crescent on his notes. Outside on the steps, the chant changed shape. We see you. We need you. A child on a parent's shoulders waved a sign that showed a pair of handcuffs opening like a hinge. Monica stepped into the warm blue of late day and breathed air that didn't taste like recycled policy. She found Naya in the crowd and pulled her into a hug that made the phone in Naya's pocket press between them like a talisman. Not done, Naya said into her shoulder. Not done, Monica agreed. Behind them, in a room that smelled of old carpet and new fear, a deputy AG opened a file folder labeled Riverton Galleria. Convergence, and began to ask very careful questions. Accountability does not arrive like a parade. It arrives like the sound of truck doors at dawn and the shake of printers grinding out warrants. It arrives like an inbox full of CCs that all finally point in the same direction. It is messy. It is slow. It is a machine beginning to move after someone has jammed a screwdriver into the right gear. Over the next week, the Galleria felt like a hospital after a cold blue. Quiet but awake, lights too bright, visitors speaking softly. Yellow tape replaced window displays. Security shirts changed color as a contractor was fired, and a new firm came in under an agreement that included words like de-escalation and bias training and third-party oversight. A sign by the food court apologized for the inconvenience and promised we are making the space safer for everyone, and for once the words felt like a plan instead of a press release. The Attorney General's office announced an investigation into the Harbor Point contract and into officers' conduct. 2 judges quietly recused themselves from mall-related cases after old emails surfaced. Easton Ridge's stock took a dip when reporters started asking about subsidies and side agreements. An internal memo leaked, the kind of document that never expects daylight, using phrases like optics and containment and acceptable loss in ways that made even cynical readers make new shapes with their mouths. Kincaid was placed on leave, then charged, first with filing false reports, then with conspiracy when email threads filled in their damning verbs. Baker and 2 other guards were indicted for assault under color of authority. Lydia Brome resigned to spend more time with the kind of lawyers who charge by the quarter hour. Harbor Point issued a statement in a font that screamed innocence and then stopped answering phone calls. In the precinct, there were whispers, then conversations, then, in some corners, a relief that had the taste of clean water. Chun and Ramirez found anonymous notes in their lockers, half threats, half thank yous. Monica's name made its way into roll calls as a cautionary tale or a banner, depending on who said it. She skipped the speeches. She met with the deputy AG in rooms with too much fluorescent lighting. She told the truth so many times it felt like a vowel shift in her mouth. Sleep returned like a tender friend. It still left early when a siren wailed too closely, but when it stayed it was deeper. She dreamed of doors that opened. One afternoon, when the light slanted in a forgiving way and the mall smelled more like perfume than fear, Monica walked back into Bell and Company. Her wrists had healed into faint lines that looked like somebody else's story. The glass cases were the same. The music pretended nothing had happened. But the staff were new, faces that carried fresh training and careful grace. "Welcome," said a young clerk with a voice you could fall onto. "Let me know if you'd like to see anything." Monica did. She wanted to see the butterfly again, the one that had gleamed under fluorescent tubes like a prophecy. The clerk smiled, unlocked the case, and laid it on the counter like an apology. As Monica paid, the clerk slipped a second small box into the bag. "From the team," she said, fingers shaking with gratitude. For everything. Outside, by the fountain where foam disguised turbulence, Selah waited with her mother and a smile that moved like sunlight. "You're really giving me a bracelet?" she asked, as if there had been any doubt. "A bracelet," Monica said, "and a promise." She fastened the delicate chain, the butterfly resting on her wrist that would soon draw new worlds. "The promise is that when people try to make you small, you'll remember how your hands look when they're open." Selah held them out. Sun found a silver and made a small constellation. A woman in a BLM cap pressed a napkin-wrapped cookie into Monica's free hand. A man in a suit whispered thank you and didn't elaborate. A grandma asked for a picture and hugged with the kind of sincerity you can't fake. Security nodded the way people nod at a funeral and a wedding. Serious, grateful, aware. The crowd didn't swell this time. It didn't need to. The story was already in the air. At the community center, a wall of names grew. People who'd been arrested in the mall's orbit and pushed onto Harbor Point's treadmills signed their names, and then, next to them, a date when their records were expunged or their probation rescinded. A line formed like at a voting station, on a day when people know what's at stake. Reverend Cal wrote in block letters at the top, "We remember / we repair." Naya's channel exploded past 100,000 subscribers. She started a series called Before the Body Cam, where she stitched together the quiet minutes that told a real story and invited guest narrators, nurses, teachers, off-duty bus drivers, to explain what happened while nothing happened. The comment sections turned into ad hoc civics classes, and sometimes prayer circles. At the precinct, new policies slid across desks. Mandatory pre-arrest video review for retail accusations. Supervisors sign off for bag checks. An explicit reminder that refusal is not probable cause. Officers rolled their eyes and then, on the weight of eyes watching, did the work anyway. A training module built around Monica's case rolled out citywide. She skipped the day they showed her face, sat in her car with the AC on, and let herself feel an old bruise ache once and then pass. A week later, the city council passed an ordinance limiting the city's ability to contract with private probation services. The vote was 8-1. The one, a man whose campaign had been gilded by Easton Ridge checks, resigned 2 days later when someone posted his emails under a headline that didn't need creative writing to sting. Jade stood on a stage at a local journalism awards night, with a sling on her arm and a new haircut that looked like she cut out the part that hurt. She thanked sources. She thanked fear for being an honest motivator. She thanked the intern who had remembered a plug in the auto backup app. When she mentioned Monica's name, the room rose like a tide. After, in a quiet corner where you could hear ice clinking glasses and a certain kind of laughter that sounded like relief, she handed Monica a thumb drive shaped like a lighthouse. "Copies of copies," Jade said, "just in case." Monica pressed it into her palm like a worry stone. Just in case. She walked home that night along a street that looked like it had the same number of streetlights, but felt brighter. The truck with the tinted windows hadn't been back. The text had slowed to a trickle of new threats, then stopped, as if whoever sent them had been reassigned to uglier work. She watered her plants. She folded her laundry. She marveled at the comfort of a couch after a week of standing and speaking like a banner. Her phone buzzed with a message from Deputy A.G. Hart. "First charges filed. More coming. Thank you." She replied, "Do your job. I'll do mine." At dusk, she stood in the kitchen and took the butterfly charm from its box. She thought of the afternoon sun in the mall sliding through skylights like a kind of forgiveness. She thought of doors. She thought of stairwells. She thought of keys. Later, on a weekday that tried to pass as ordinary, she met Taryn and Naya and Reverend Cal at the community center. The crowd was smaller than the rally, which made it more intimate and therefore, in some ways, heavier. People took turns at a microphone donated by a man who'd once managed a Radio Shack and still believed in chords. They told what had happened to them, as if they were reading lines off a palm. They spoke the names of guards and officers and judges into a room that had prayer embedded in the paint. They named the days they'd paid fees they didn't owe, the hours they'd sat in waiting rooms that smelled like despair and coffee. They named the people who had given them rides and watched their kids and kept casseroles in deep freezes like armor. When the time came, Monica stepped forward. She didn't hold a badge. She didn't wear a uniform. She had a pair of hands that had learned to open and a voice that didn't need a mic to sound like truth. "I carried a purse," she said, and the room laughed the kind of laugh that knows irony the way it knows rain. "I walked into a store to buy a gift. They put me in cuffs because that was the script they'd written for me. But scripts get revised. The ending changes when enough people refuse their lines." She paused. Let silence take its place at the table. This isn't over. It won't be over when the last headline runs, or the last check is cut, or the last resignation falls into the news cycle. It's over when a girl with a sketchbook and a bracelet can walk through any door in this city and be seen first as a child and not as a threat. It's over when nobody builds profit on fear. It's over when we stop needing walls like this. She touched the names taped to paint, because the names never got there to begin with. Ray, in the second row, nodded until her glasses slipped, then wiped her eyes with a tissue she pretended was just a tissue. Naya filmed and didn't cry, not because she wasn't moved, but because she had learned the camera shakes when you do. Taryn squeezed Monica's hand, then squeezed it again like punctuation. They ended with a simple act. Everyone wrote the name of one person who had helped them: lawyer, teacher, neighbor, clerk who'd slipped a business card across a counter at the right minute, and taped those names on the other wall. 2 columns, harm and help. The second rose faster than the first. Someone drew a line between them with a dry erase marker. It looked like a bridge. A day later, the Galleria installed a sign at every entrance that said, "All searches require voluntary consent. Refusal is not probable cause. Ask for a manager. Cameras monitored by independent oversight." It was language engineered with lawyers, but it could be read by the people who needed it. Monica walked past it and smiled in a way that felt new in her mouth. A week after that, Internal Affairs concluded its preliminary review. It didn't clear the department. It didn't condemn a wholesale. It did something more valuable. It named processes that had to change and people who had to answer. It reminded the precinct that policy is only as strong as the most bored officer on his most tired day. It wrote Monica's name into the footnotes of more memos than she'd ever wanted, and then, finally, handed her badge back across the desk. "You didn't have to suspend me to make your point," she told the deputy chief, voice polite and edged. "We had to follow procedure," he said, sounding like someone who had recently discovered the difference between a manual and a moral. "Then write a better procedure," she said, and took the badge because it was hers and because she knew how to carry it. On an ordinary Thursday, she met Sale at the art store and bought the good pencils, the ones that made lines smooth as rain, and a sketchbook that didn't bleed through. They stopped for lemonade in cups too cold for the weather. On the bench outside, Sale drew the fountain at the Galleria from memory and gave the water wings. "What should I call it?" Sale asked, tilting her head the way artists do when they're measuring angles. "Call it Before and After," Monica said. "Or call it Open Hands." Sale thought. "I'll call it Evidence," she said, grinning, because she was 10 and already understood more than most counsels. They laughed until the lemonade tasted even sweeter. They went home under a sky that had learned how to be evening without needing to be dramatic, the city buzz around them doing city things. Somewhere, a case number moved on a docket. Somewhere, a judge reread an email he had pretended not to understand. Somewhere, a man with a badge he hadn't earned and a temper he had fed looked at his hands and discovered they were empty. Monica set her tote down on the kitchen table. It looked like any bag. It was just a bag. It had never been a crime. She placed her badge beside it, not because she needed to prove anything to objects, but because it felt right to let the two sit there for a minute, side by side, ordinary, luminous, heavier than their size. When the phone buzzed again, it was not a threat. It was a message from Jade. Final piece in the series drops at 6. Title, The Cost of a Bag Check. Monica texted back a single word, run. And then, because life keeps its own clock, the kettle clicked off with a small sound like mercy. She poured tea. She stood at the window while steam rose and curled. Outside, a neighbor boy zipped by on a scooter, laughing. A woman sang to a baby in a language Monica didn't know, but recognized anyway. Somewhere in the distance, sirens did their bright dance and then turned a corner and softened. The city did not become perfect. It became possible. Sometimes that is the larger miracle. Monica lifted the cup, tasted peppermint and quiet. She looked at her hands, those ordinary instruments of work and welcome, and thought of the first moment in the mall when she felt the old rage rise. She had not swallowed it. She had shaped it. She had turned it into policy and tape and voices. She had remembered what her grandmother used to say when a storm bent trees but left them standing. "Baby, Wind can't snatch a root if the roots are holding each other. She turned off the kitchen light, let the room take back its dusk, and walked toward the rest of her evening. The kind made of small goods, of names on walls, of bridges drawn in dry erase marker, of girls with bracelets and sketchbooks, of cameras turned on before and not only after. And every entrance to the Galleria, from then on, carried a new rule in letters you could read from the curb. Consent is required. Dignity is not optional. Share this story if you believe everyone deserves justice, regardless of who they are or what they look like. Hit that like button if you want to see more stories of courage triumphing over corruption, and subscribe because just as stories like this happen every day and everyone deserves to see them, your story could be next.